right. So another podcast episode in the life of using AI and finding some some of the challenges, some of the victories, and so on. I had a friend tell me last week. I put it on LinkedIn too. That AI is a lot like a lazy intern. And man, I mean, he nailed it. I honestly think of all the videos I've seen and tutorials and all that stuff, man, that really sums it up. It's like all the confidence in the world, uh, but none of the actual experience. And so, um, yeah, when an intern says, "Oh, I finished it," and then it's done in like record time, you know, probably not. So anyway, that's kind of what I'm finding with, Claude. And just to give you an example, there have been some actual updates with Claude lately that are really impressive. Use of agents, um, being able to improve context outside of an actual context window, but using files to, um, you know, to go out and build research that then can be used in Claude to improve workflow and making sure that you don't max out that context window and so on. So the but man, I'll tell you, here's an example. I'll just go through the examples. I have a Pinecone database, which you can see here, and we anonymize our data from our production database and we put it into a Pinecone, and then um, we vectorize this message that we create. So, for instance, a donor, Massachusetts, MA, made a donation of $100 and blah, blah, blah. And then it gets vectorized using OpenAI's embeddings, small 3 or something like that. I forget. And then it gets put into this. So we have almost a million records, just under a million records. And so, um, but what I did was, I'm learning. So I made a mistake, and this, these records need to have namespaces, but we're using just the default on all 900,000 records. But we actually passed in a data type here. Wait a minute. Sorry. Record type. Every record that we created is a record type, and we gave it a category name. So this should actually be converted from record type, and the donation should be added to the namespace. So there's a way to do it. You can upsert new data, and then it'll update the record in Pinecone, hopefully, so that way I don't have to go back through and re-embed a bunch of data. So I thought, all right, cool. Claude helped me write this code as a Lambda function, and so I haven't written a single line of this code. Nothing. I mean, not a single line. All I've done is give it instructions. And so, the way that works is you use Claude MD to put together just some basic information. Every time there's a new context window started, it uses the Claude MD file to, well, actually, whenever you do a chat or a request, it uses the Claude MD file. My experience is that it doesn't always use everything in the Claude MD file. You could say, for instance, in Claude, I could say, did I put it in here? I put in here somewhere, it says, always do this when you deploy to AWS. It doesn't. It just ignores that directive. I created a deploy README so that way it would, like for instance, Docker is not installed. Don't even bother with it. But for whatever reason, when I tell it to use this README file and it deploys, it still tries to do. Well, it doesn't always. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It's almost like it just kind of forgets what it did last time and says, well, let's just start from scratch. Like I got the new guy in. So somebody shift ended, somebody else comes in to do their shift, and then that person didn't get the data from the other person. So it's funny because we're experiencing similar things that you get when you have a workforce of people, but we assume AI is not going to have that problem. Uh, but imagine running a startup with all interns. That's kind of what it feels like with code tools like with AI right now. So, for instance, there's a lot here, and I could, I've been working for about, let's see, 49. I started a little after 8 this morning, and so I still haven't gotten this thing to run yet on the 900,000. But what Claude does do is it does really important things that I didn't think of. Like for instance, when I said, "Hey, I need this," I started out with a prompt that said, "I need this a new endpoint in my Lambda functions so that can call and update namespaces from a specific piece of metadata." And it said, "Okay, cool. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a dry run flag, and then I'm going to have a different flag for this thing." And I thought, oh, that's a great idea. Like, yeah, let's have a dry run so that I don't just try and deploy this thing because it's never going to work right the first time. So it actually solved that problem before I even asked it. And so, so you get this like confidence boost, like, oh, okay, cool. It's actually doing stuff that I need it to do. And then it just trips and falls flat on its face with like the proverbial banana peel. Like, what were you like? How did you not do this? Um, and in addition to that, I have a limited knowledge base on how Lambda functions work. This thing is being written in Python, so I don't know Python real well. So, I'm having to like kind of believe that it's doing what it's supposed to do. And so sometimes I'll see something and I'll be like, oh, wait, 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 whoa, stop, Claude, catching this. Now, sometimes I'm right. And it's like, oh, thanks for that. Yeah, you're right. This is this. Other times it's like, no, no. What you don't understand is that it's actually doing this. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. So now I've just sent you down this rabbit trail. And I shouldn't have done that. I should just kept my mouth shut. So now what I'm doing is I thought I had this working. So what it does is it updates the endpoint. And so now it says, okay, go ahead and give it a try. So I come over here to Postman. I run this, this endpoint here, and then it gives me a task ID. Then I go to the task and update um, and see what happened. And then it looks like it worked, right? I mean, it gave me all of this stuff. It actually pulled data out. And I'm like, sweet. But then it says, but what I do is I said, all right, trust but verify. So I copied the response back into Claude. You can see here. And then it's, well, there's an important issue. Did it, but then it gave me the issue. This is the kind of stuff I like. Like, this is great. And now it says, since all your vectors, record type deletion, they would all be, mitigated or migrated to the unknown. Yeah. So, and I read that and I thought, oh, hold on a second. I don't have 908,000 vectors do not have this record type. They're different. So I said, stop. It gave me a plan. Always, always, always use the planning. And what I've learned is that when you use Claude, if you have the max plan like I do, your planning is always done in Opus. And then it will use Opus or Sonnet when it's actually writing the code. You can ask it to use Opus until it runs out of, I think it's like it'll get through 50% of its tokens, and then it'll go switch to Sonnet. Or you can say, listen, always use Opus for planning and only use Sonnet for development. That way you get all your horsepower in the planning phase. But again, it did some really good planning. But then I said, wait, this isn't quite right. So then I said, this isn't accurate. And then it says, you're absolutely right. This is that lazy intern thing, because it's like, it was telling me that I'm absolutely right the first time. Now it's telling me I'm absolutely right the second time. And then the third time. You lose a lot of confidence. You almost have to have like no trust in AI, but then why even use it? So here we go. You're absolutely right. The inventory only sampled 100 vectors, blah, blah, blah. So what I need to do is I have a couple options, I think is what it said. Yeah, option one, dynamic namespacing is recommended, or get a larger sample size, or query Pinecone for unique values. And it's like, well, definitely not a larger sample size. You'd have to get the full sample size to know confidently that you have all of the right record types. Dynamic makes the most sense because it doesn't matter how many record types I have, it's always going to modify it. But this feels like it's like, yeah, okay. There's a lot of potential for error here. But then the third one would be we could scan more vectors and build a complete list. See, I don't know. This one, you know what? Actually, option one feels like the right option. So, recommendation for the migration without knowing all the record types we can modify. Would you like me to modify? Yes, I'm going to go with one. And I'm going to switch. I'm going to use Shift Tab to bypass permissions are on. I'm running in YOLO mode. So, I don't always recommend this, but you know, I'm using it because I love to, you know, live on the edge. But now it's going to go through and it's going to modify it, and then it's going to upload it. Then I'm going to look at it on, uh, they just repeat this process. This is the process that I've been running for the past, 3 hours. Now the question is, okay, great. Could I have done this in 3 hours? I don't know Python, but could I have done this in languages that I do understand? PHP, JavaScript. Yeah, maybe. And I could have probably taken a less. What I'm trying to figure out is how can I take a less AI approach while still leveraging AI? Like, what if I asked ChatGPT in a separate, like I just opened up ChatGPT and I said, okay, well, what about how can I write a function to do this? And it does this really small thing, and then I put that in my code, and then I keep coding. And then whenever there's an error, instead of going, I mean, I'm basically replacing Stack Overflow with, an AI chatbot or an AI tool. So there's like, that's the fractional AI, more of an AI assistant or a side by side coder. But what Claude Code is suggesting is that you kind of take your hands off and just let it cook, which is what I'm doing here. And I'm, again, because I don't know how to use, I don't know how to query Pinecone. I don't know the API. I'd have to learn the API. I'd have to set up a box. I'd have to, these things take, when we do upserts of hundreds of thousands of records, it takes hours. So I have to have queuing and batching and all these other things that, once it starts to escalate, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do, I can run a query, but I don't, to build a batching system and all that. So in 3 hours, I'm getting it to the point, hopefully, in the next 10, 15 minutes, I have this thing hopefully figured out. Yeah, right. So now it's okay. So I'm just looking. Um, so it looks like update the async handler. So at some point it's going to deploy. I'm not sure why this feels like it's new where it says deploying changes to AWS. That's not really what it's doing. It's actually updating a function which will eventually deploy to AWS. But anyway, could I have done this in 3 hours without the use of AI? No, probably not. It's still faster, but I find myself slamming my head against the wall for, you know, those 3 hours waiting for AI to do something that inevitably isn't going to work. It's going to have to go back. I'm going to give it some feedback. I'm going to maybe make a suggestion, but then it's going to go through logs. And it does do that really well. It goes through server logs. It looks up documentation online. I mean, like right now, it's using Opus to code, which is great. So, uh, it's doing more than I could do. But again, is it going to do all the wrong thing? How many wrong things is it going to do before it gets the right thing or the good enough thing to get this thing done and complete? And that's really, the lesson that I'm learning today. It's the analogy that I used, which is definitely not as good as the one my friend told me about the lazy intern, is that, using AI is a lot like playing 18 holes of golf if you're not that good. Is that you'll send a golf ball into the woods 17 holes out of 18, but you'll hit that one great fairway shot on one of those 18 holes, and then you'll be like, yeah, I can do this. I'm going to keep going. And so AI will give you great results, but then 17 crap results after that. So sometimes it's just nuts. So anyway, that's my contribution for today's discussion.